Hello.
Hello.
Welcome back. My name's Kelly.
I'm McCurdy.
So this is our second video in our Wives of Henry VIII series. So we're on Anne Boleyn. And yeah, so we'll get into it. She's probably the most famous wife.
The most well-known.
Like the most intriguing, the one that everybody talks about. The one that
She's
everybody
also
knows.
like the most scandalous.
Yeah. She's kind of the most talked about, I think.
And in reality, she's the one that contributes the most to history or the English. Can you hand me that eyeglass cleaner? Because she does give birth to Elizabeth II and also breaks England from the church.
Yeah. Okay, so
should we do a little TR, like, too long didn't read on the Reformation?
if you want to, I didn't really look much up it.
Okay, so too long didn't read Reformation. This is kind of the start of the Reformation in England. Germany, I think, is already starting to do some of the Reformation things.
Martin Luther is like in Germany being like, basically the Reformation, they're trying to strip away all of the extravagancies of Catholicism.
Because the Catholic Church has become very politicized, corrupt. They're selling indulgences like to extreme stances. They're like, priests are having wives. The Pope is doing things for money and power. So Luther and a lot of other people are trying to get rid of a lot of that. And that's where you come up with the Reformation and what leads to this.
Yeah, so basically this is the start of the Catholic Church not being, I mean, it still is like the most relevant.
This is where we're starting to get new religions that are Judaism.
Protestant religions.
Yes.
Other Jesus-based religions that's not Catholicism. So, this queen, or Anne Boleyn, was the first queen to be publicly executed in England.
Love that.
Which I don't know if there were queens after that got publicly executed.
Antoinette?
In England.
Oh, in England, I don't know.
She was the first in England, but I don't know if other places publicly executed their queens. So Henry is married to Catherine of Aragon, and he is like, you're old, you haven't given me a son. If we remember from the last video, she had multiple miscarriages, and he was like, I don't really want to be with you anymore. So he kind of like put her to the side, and
he's falling madly in love with Anne Boleyn.
Well, first he has some other mistresses, so he's had
mistresses the whole time.
Well, yeah, but he becomes infatuated with Anne and is scheming with the Archbishop of England, or Canterbury, to get rid of Catherine, to kind of make it seem like their marriage was incestuous, that their marriage should never have been legal in the first place.
Their marriage is being frowned upon by God.
Yeah, like they're trying to get an annulment because she's staunchly Catholic and would never get a divorce. Okay. Anne Boleyn was born in 1501, but some sources say 1507. There's not a clear... That's kind of a long gap to not know when she was born, but that's kind of the time frame we're looking at, is 1501 to 1507. I don't remember how old Henry would have been at this time, but...
was 14 and 1500, because that's when they were set to get married to
1400?
Or, I'm so sorry, 1500.
1500, like...
The year 1500 is when they were set to get married, because he was coming of age.
Okay. So she's quite a bit younger than him. She's quite a bit younger than Catherine. I'm going to stick with the 1501 because that's what most sources said her birth was the year of her birth. They don't know when her birthday actually was, because records weren't... Her early life isn't very well documented. So she was born to a wealthy family. Her husband... Oh my God.
Her father.
I get together. Her father's name was Thomas Boleyn, and he was like a wealthy merchant, I think. It said mercer. I'm not quite sure what that is, but he was wealthy. And then her mother was Elizabeth.
Naturally.
Who, she was the daughter... I don't know what her dad's name was, but she was the daughter of the second Duke of Norfolk. So he was very high up in the... in society. Like, he was very wealthy. He was very influential. So those were her parents. They had a lot of connections. Anne's mother, Elizabeth, was part of Catherine's household, so she was like a lady in waiting, or like basically they all like the queens have like like women who like were companions to them. They helped them get dressed. They weren't necessarily servants because they were usually high up ladies, but they were ladies in waiting. They basically,
if you've seen like The Great, there's a lot of all of the court are like ladies. They're higher up, but they're also in servitude to the queen, but they're not servants.
Yeah, so they basically like hang out with the queen and I don't know, things like that. They give her advice, stuff like that. So Elizabeth, who was Anne's mother, was in Catherine's court. And then she had 3 siblings, George, Mary, and Anne. I think that's the order that they were born in, but I don't know for sure. I know that Anne was younger than Mary. And Thomas, her dad, used his children to increase his wealth, increase his power, increase his influence.
Which is what everyone does.
Yeah, so he was like scheming behind the scenes to try and get, like marriages that were well off. He was trying to get George to be a member of the king's court and all of that kind of stuff. So Mary and Anne weren't super close to each other, but then eventually they became even less close because Mary had an affair with Henry before Anne was with Henry. So Anne was sent as a child, like 13 or so, to Belgium for school. She went to like a finishing school or something, and then she went to France to attend to Henry's sister, who was Mary, and she was the Queen of France at the time. So she was like an attendant to the Queen of France.
Henry VIII's sister?
Yeah, Mary.
Okay.
And Francis was the king at that time. I think that's what Reign focuses on.
Maybe.
But again, I didn't watch that show very much. I watched a few episodes, but anyway, so then at 13, she goes to wherever, to France. She spends most of her life in France. She learns how to be like a courtly presence in France.
Also at this time, French is the
language.
Yeah, it's the language of it's like the language. Everyone speaks French. Even the English noble people speak French in their day-to-day lives. It's the language of the court. There's even some like English higher ups that don't know, they can't speak English. So French
English
is
more
like,
for the common people.
Yes, French is the language.
Yeah. So you have basically, if you were going to do anything worthwhile, you had to learn how to read in French. And even later, like even today, I think it's still pretty common for English people, to speak French. Okay, so in 1521, Anne moves back to England and becomes part of Catherine of Aragon's court. She becomes part of that household with her sister. So they're both ladies in waitings. Let's see, Mary was... Oh, there was also a time... I'm like kind of jumping all over the place, and sorry for that. So Mary was married off to... I don't know who she married, but she married someone wealthy, and she married someone, and then she started having an affair with Henry.
Oh, she was already married.
Yeah, she was married and had an affair with Henry at the same time.
It's also one of those things like, you can't really say no.
No.
Because he's a king.
If the king basically wants you, you kind of have to. And at this time, he was writing Anne. He like courted her for like 10 years. Like he had been trying to get her to become his mistress for years and years. And she was like, I'm not going to be a mistress. I'm going to be a wife. If I'm going to be with you, I want to be the queen. And so she took a lot of convincing. So he turned to Mary. And Mary had 2 children during her marriage to some nobleman. And it's speculated that Henry was the father of one or both children. He never acknowledged them like he did with the other bastard son that he had.
It would be hard because they wouldn't be able to prove that it was Henry's.
Yeah,
like the other one, she wasn't married.
Yeah. So...
And I think that kid looked a lot like Henry.
He never acknowledged them like he did with Henry Fitzroy, because really there's no way of knowing for sure if they were married or if whose kid it was. But they had an affair around the same time that she had children, so it's possible. And I think she had 2 boys, but I don't know for sure. So anyway, she's in her household, and she was set to marry or she falls in love with a man named Henry Percy, and he was like a wealthy courtier. And
Anne, we're still talking.
Anne, yeah. Okay. So Anne fell in love with. Well, she was set to marry her cousin from Ireland, and then that didn't happen. I think because the king stepped in and was like, "No, you can't marry him." And then she fell in love with Henry Percy, who was just he was like a guy that was hanging around all the time, and they loved each other. But the engagement, they were secretly engaged. But Henry called that engagement off as well. He was like, no, and then banished.
Which Henry?
Henry Percy. Henry the King banished Henry Percy, and then she was sent to live in Norfolk at her family home. And then he kept sending letters to him.
Oh, so he ruined her chance at love because he was still... Okay.
Yeah, so he didn't want her to marry or have... Like, he didn't want her... He wanted her for himself, and so he ruined all of her chances. And apparently she was very, like, at the time, the standard of beauty was, like, very fair, light skin, light hair, light eyes, like, very light. And she had dark hair, dark eyes. She was more, like, dark and mysterious. And so people really, nobody liked her, but they were very intrigued by her. And she was very charismatic, and she was very, like, people say that, like, she has this reputation of being promiscuous or, like, flirtatious with everyone, and she might have been, but we don't know that for sure, but it seems like everyone was kind of infatuated with her. They didn't like her. She was never popular, even in her own time, but men were drawn to her.
Plus also, like, if she's saying no to the king and everyone knows that she's saying no to the king, that's kind of like, ooh, like...
Right. Well, she was very witty. She was super smart. She was, like, quick and sassy and fiery, and that's what really attracted the king to Anne. She was the only one who ever, like, stood up to him and was like, no, this is how we're gonna do it.
Sure. And I'm not gonna have sex with you. Unless I'm the queen.
She's like, unless you offer me marriage, we're not doing this. So between 1526 and 1527, he starts writing letters to her and wants her to be his mistress. And she says, no, I'll only be the wife. And then he starts, let's see. I don't know why I made my notes like this, because they're all jumbled up. And the timeline is just absolutely crazy in my notes here. Excuse me, a little bit of a tickle. So she, like I said, she was kind of arrogant. A lot of the people in court were like, she's really arrogant. She's kind of snobby, kind of standoffish, but she was also kind of flirtatious and mysterious. Very charismatic. People said that she wasn't necessarily a renowned beauty, but she was very intriguing. She's, like, kind of, I think, remembered in history as being this beautiful temptress, seductress, but she wasn't that good-looking in terms of the times. So she was the only one who stood up to him. People don't know if she actually loved him or if she just wanted to be queen, if she just wanted to be power, or, like, she was kind of power hungry.
I think, like, also, she just, like, she wanted to be queen, and she was not going to let anything come between her and being queen. Yeah. And she knew if she gave in to Henry, without being queen, she would be a mistress, and she would be tossed aside once he no longer was infatuated or someone else came along, like he did with Mary, like he did with Elizabeth, the one who had his child, every other, even like he did with
Elizabeth
Catherine.
Was his child.
Yeah, but there was also an Elizabeth that was Henry Fitzroy's
mother. Yeah. Okay.
And also his mother's name.
Yeah. So Anne's mother was named Elizabeth, and Henry's mother's name was Elizabeth, and that's kind of, they think that's why they named Elizabeth for both parents. So in 1532, Thomas Cranmer, who's the Archbishop of Canterbury, grants an annulment and secretly marries Anne and Henry. He says, no, Catherine and him were never married.
Where does the Pope fall in that?
So I think the Pope is kind of, so it's Pope Clement VII. He refuses to allow the annulment for a few years because Henry's rival, Charles V, I think he's the Holy Roman Emperor at the time, and he's very, very powerful, and he has the Pope's ear. So he is, like, influencing the Pope behind his back, and Catherine of Aragon was Charles V's aunt.
That, and also if Henry doesn't have children, or doesn't have a male heir, because even if Henry Fitzroy is his son, that's still a weak argument, even though he's been legitimized, it's still a weak claim to the throne, and so Charles probably also wants Henry to stay childless.
Yeah, because then he has a closer tie to the throne, or the throne is less, it's up for grabs pretty much.
Yeah, it's less stable.
So he the Pope refuses to allow, at the insistence of Pope Clement. And then eventually, so this is kind of when the Reformation kind of starts happening. Slowly Henry starts stripping power away from the Pope in England. So he starts saying, you know what, actually, the Pope doesn't have our best interests in mind, so I'm going to take over this part of what the Pope does, and then I'm going to take over what this part of the Pope does. So he kind of starts chipping away at the Pope's power with his in the country, so people are like, oh yeah, maybe, like, he gives himself all these titles, and like just slowly starts taking power from the church, and then eventually they completely he completely breaks from the church, and they start the Anglican Church, right?
The Church of England.
Church of England, which
the Anglican Church.
The king and or queen, the king or queen, whoever is not the consort, but like the actual bloodline. Like Charles is the head of the church right now. So
no,
yeah,
Charles.
No, Charles. Like
King Charles. Okay, I thought you meant Charles V, and I was like, no, Holy Roman.
No, Charles in our current timeline,
Charles.
in the present day 2025, King Charles is the head of the Anglican Church.
And also the Pope died yesterday.
I know, how sad.
And also,
this is the greatest thing that's ever happened.
It's my favorite. Not that the Pope died.
Not that the Pope died. That's
but
terrible.
Everyone is blaming JD Vance.
And I think that's hilarious.
I saw one that was like, the Pope met JD Vance, and he was like, nah, I gotta go tell God in person.
So, 1532, John Cranmer. His name is spelled Cranmer, but that sounds weird. It's like Cranmer. Anyway, did I say John? It's Thomas. Yeah. Thomas Cranmer, Archbishop of Canterbury, which is like the highest position in the Anglican Church besides the king.
And also, let's make note that the king, or the Church of England, at this point, is exactly the same as the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. Exactly the same. Nothing has changed, except for the Pope is no longer connected to it. The king is. Mm-hmm. So everything else stays the same. So up until this point.
Yeah. So basically, he kind of does similar things to what Luther was doing, where he just wants to get the extravagance stripped away, so it's more in line with Jesus and God or whatever.
I don't think that comes with him, though.
That comes with Luther. That's Luther's thing, and I think Henry kind of starts to do that too. He also starts taxing monasteries.
Good.
And any monastery that's less than 200 people has to be closed. So they start closing monasteries, they're taxing the church, and they're doing all kinds of other things that have completely changed the way that the church is set up in that time. So 32, he grants the annulment and secretly marries Anne and Henry. And that was in January, I believe. And then Catherine died shortly after. Catherine of Aragon died shortly after. And then in June of 1533...
So it's a moot point anyway. He breaks from the church and then it's no longer matters. They could have waited.
Yeah, because she died. But he still...
is mad that the Pope...
Well, I think he still couldn't freely marry her. Even in her death. Mm. Well, because I know that, like... I think in the Anglican Church, you can't technically get divorced because in the eyes of the Lord, you're always married to that person. So, like, in The Crown, there was this huge thing in the show The Crown. Margaret wanted to marry a divorced man, and the church wouldn't let her. Because even though she was dead, maybe it's different because they were died. I don't know, but you can't marry a divorced man or woman.
Okay, so that's why everyone had such a hard time with Camilla and Charles.
Because she was divorced. And he was divorced.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know how that works when someone dies, but they basically said that it was still shady, so they still wanted the annulment. So then she died in 1536. No. I don't remember, but in June of 1533, they were publicly married, and she was visibly pregnant. Ooh. And even though they had been married for a while before, but no one knew that. And then she gives birth in September of 33 to Elizabeth.
Oh, Catherine dies in 36. We're talking about 33.
I think that's wrong, though.
But regardless, Catherine dies shortly after. I thought she was alive for a little while. We're going to look it up.
I'm going to look it up because I don't know. Okay, who spells Catherine with a C? That's just outrageous.
It's debated because...
No, I mean, Catherine should never be spelled with a C.
It shouldn't, but Catherine the Great is spelled with... There's a lot of Catherine spelled with a C.
I think it's ridiculous. Okay, so she dies in 36.
Okay.
So I was wrong. It's annulled in 33. She dies in 36. I must have misread that. Anywho. So shortly before Anne is accused of adultery is when she dies. So Anne and Henry are having this, like, blessed marriage. She gives birth to Elizabeth. They're a little bit bummed because they thought it was going to be a boy, because she promised that she would give him a son. So then they're only married for like 3 years.
Yeah.
And he soon lost interest in Anne because she didn't give him a son. So in 1533 is when...
give away the milk when you can have the cow. He got the cow and was like, nah, just kidding.
Well, okay, so Elizabeth was born in 33. She had a miscarriage in 1534. And then she had a stillborn. Well, I'm not sure if it was a stillborn or a miscarriage. I think she gave birth to the baby, but it was only like 4 months along. So a stillborn. I'm not sure. And that was in 1535, and they suspect, based on the anatomy, that it was a boy. Okay. So she miscarried a son, and then Henry started having affairs pretty early on, and people started questioning Anne. So she wasn't well liked. She was haughty and arrogant.
And she wasn't well liked prior to this either. Mm-mm. The only reason people liked her is because it was like mysterious.
She was mysterious.
And now she was a queen, so they were kind of forced to like
her. Yeah, and she had a reputation of being flirtatious and friendly, and so people just didn't like that. She rubbed people the wrong way. So then in later in either 1535 or 1536, Anne there's rumors in the court being spread that she was committing adultery with many men,
including her brother George.
Yeah, so she was I think there was like 5 or 6 men that were charged with adultery, because that's a crime. And then she was charged with incest as well. And then there's also a rumor that she cursed Henry. She cast a spell on him to make her fall in love with him and leave Catherine so that she could be queen. That's debated. People don't know if that was a rumor started later or if that was a rumor at the time. There's one guy who wrote, his name is Matthew something, I think. He is a contemporary writer, but he wrote after her death, so like during Elizabeth's reign. And he starts the rumor that she was a witch because she had, there's a rumor that she had a 6th finger, and that tied her to witchcraft. She had a wart, this is another rumor that she was tied her to witchcraft. And then the same guy who wrote the story in like during Elizabeth's time was saying that he knew she was a witch because she gave birth to a deformed baby. The miscarriage, they called it a lump of flesh.
Oh, yuck.
Which is, like I said, after.
It's not untrue. But also, literally any mark upon a woman's body could be the sign of the devil. Mm-hmm. So, like, freckle, birthmark, scar, anything. Mm-hmm. Extra fingers, extra toes, anything is a sign that a woman is a devil. Mm-hmm. Or in league with the devil.
So, this is right before, like, the big witch trials for England happen right after Elizabeth's death in 1603. Yeah. So, this is leading up to
it was about
their
half
trials.
A century?
Yeah.
A little more.
So people think she's a witch. She's speculated. She did not, as far as we know, she did not have a 6th finger. That was just a rumor because there's no evidence of that. And then she was sent to the Tower of London, and she was held there for ages, and people said that they would hear her wailing and just screaming.
She's also separated from her daughter.
Yeah, her daughter was taken away from her. Well, and then shortly, so Mary was sent away. Henry's other daughter, the oldest daughter from Catherine, she was sent away, and then after Catherine died, Anne was like, oh, we should probably bring her back, and tried to have a bond with her, but it didn't really work out. And then before everything went down with her being an adulterer, Henry passed a law called the Act of Succession, which basically forced all of the noblemen to sign or to like declare an oath that Catherine's daughter Mary was illegitimate, and that the new successor was going to be Elizabeth. That because it was an incestuous marriage between Catherine and Arthur. Because she was like named a dowager princess after.
Because he still respected her in some sense.
Yeah.
Like he still.
After he married Anne, she was moved to dowager princess because of her connection to Arthur. But yeah, so Mary was named illegitimate, and because Mary was threatened Elizabeth's station because she was the oldest daughter.
Yeah. So then Anne is going to do anything she can to kind of like whisper in the ear to be like, hey.
Yeah. So she is sentenced. Jury of her peers tries her claims, and I think most of the men that she was accused of incest with her brother and then 3 or 4 other men, and they were all sentenced to death. And then Anne was also eventually sentenced to death. And I should look up to see when. I didn't write the date of when that happens. Anne was sentenced to death. She died May 19th of 1536. So her, like, the most documented point in her life was the 21 days from the time that she was accused to the time that she was sentenced. And she died. She was, like, basically just, like, thrown into a grave. She wasn't given a funeral. She wasn't given a proper burial.
And this is still, like, a Queen of England.
Yeah. She, eventually, they found what they believe is her body, and I think Queen Victoria's time period, they were remodeling in the tower, and they found a body, and they believe that it was Anne Boleyn's, and so now she has been buried in Westminster Abbey, or in the tower, I can't remember. She's in the Tower of London now, and she does have a burial site, like a proper plaque and stuff. So just making sure that I don't have anything else super. So she was accused and beheaded and all of that. They brought in a fancy, because she was either going to be burned at the stake or beheaded, and they told her they wouldn't burn her at the stake. So she was beheaded, but instead of doing like an axe, like a commoner, they did bring in a really
like a
famous
guillotine?
French
executioner.
swordsman.
Oh, a swordsman, like broadsword.
Yeah, so they brought in a French swordsman so that it would be a swift and just death. And it's rumored that her eyes and lips were moving after her head was removed from her body. That, I don't know if that's true. That's a rumor. Because after all this, like, there was a bunch of lore on Anne Boleyn that she was a witch and she had all of this stuff. So she was beheaded, and then 11 days later, Henry married Jane Seymour.
And we'll talk about her next week.
Yes. So
this next...
He already had a new wife.
Look up when he dies.
Hold on one sec. I'm just making sure I didn't forget anything. Oh, so even though he removed England from the church, he was still mostly a devout Catholic. Like, he was basically a Catholic in practice, a Protestant in name.
Which is kind of what I said earlier.
Yes, exactly. He followed basically all of the... What am I looking at?
When did Henry VIII die?
Oh, I put spouse. Oh, yeah, that's right. Henry died in 1547.
So, like, 10 years later? So he has 5 of his 6 wives within a 10-year...
He was only 55 when he died.
Yeah, but he died of, like, nasty wounds and grossness.
The king, at some point when he was with Anne, he got into a jousting accident, and he was flung from a horse, and he remained unconscious for 2 years, so they thought maybe he would die.
2 years?
No, not 2 years, I'm so sorry, 2 hours.
Oh my god.
Gosh, that's a lot.
I was like, I didn't know that.
Fuck. They thought maybe that he would be dead after that, but also, he might have sustained brain damage, so maybe that's kind of why his life kind of... And I think because of those injuries and stuff is why he kind of became more portly, and he had gout and was kind of just gross.
Kind of just became, like, more... Less of the friendly, like, charismatic Henry. But that also could be
less of
potentially
the, like,
syphilis
strong...
or...
the strong man.
Yeah.
So, yeah, she died, and he already had a third wife,
in the wings.
in the wings.
Because at this time, he still needs to find a male heir.
He still needs an heir, yeah.
Regardless that he has Henry Fitzroy, he has Elizabeth, he has Mary, but, like, he still really wants, especially how tenuous the Tudor line was in the beginning, with Henry VII and into Henry VIII, they really want to strengthen up that line.
Anne had the strongest connection to the throne. She was like a descendant of Edward, one of the Edwards or something.
So she has a better claim than Henry.
Yeah, something like that. And then all of the portraits, I read this thing that said all of the portraits that we have of her, we actually don't know what she looks like because those were all
reimagined.
Those were all painted painted years later, and probably recreations of other paintings, or replicas of other paintings, because they would have destroyed most of the current paintings from when she was alive.
Yeah, pretty much anything with her face on it, they would have destroyed.
But she is considered very politically and kind of culturally, religiously important, because she's a key figure in getting the English Reformation started and really changing hundreds of years of religion and tradition in England.
Which also leads, again, hundreds of years of infighting between, like, Mary and Elizabeth, and then you have, like, Protestants and Catholics fight forever.
Yeah, because Mary is a devout Catholic. Elizabeth was a staunch Protestant. And then they kind of fight back and forth for years. And then Elizabeth names James the First of England, Sixth of Scotland, as her successor, because she never had kids, because Elizabeth is famously the Virgin Queen. She was queen for a long, long time. So Anne Boleyn is the mother of one of the greatest rulers in England, and one of the rulers who had one of the longest reigns.
And also, like, everything is from Elizabethan England. Like, what you know about England and what medieval England is, like, Elizabethan England.
She was queen for a long time.
Where you get, like, some of the most important things are from Elizabethan England, like Shakespeare, and
a lot of the culture that we have is from
and then you have, like, those big Elizabethan like, people remember Elizabeth.
Yeah. And she reigned from 1558 to 1603 when she passed away. Elizabeth is interesting too.
Yeah, maybe we'll talk about her another time.
But yeah, so that's all I have on Anne. There's a lot of rumors about her that aren't true, like the sixth finger, that she was a witch, that she was promiscuous, and most of those things seem to be untrue.
So it's one of those things where it's like a regular woman is made into this insane,
like, heinous villain.
When does that not happen? Kamala Harris. Everybody else. And then, like, you find out centuries later, like, oh, she was probably just regular.
And she was just a young girl trying to
make her way in the world that's full of men and trying to get something out of it.
Yeah, she's just a young woman trying to get any semblance of power that she can.
Which, you know what I also think is interesting? And maybe because she's the first one and because she is the mother of Elizabeth, we forget about Catherine Howard. Like, nobody ever thinks about Catherine Howard, but when you look back, we'll talk about this later, but, like, she's the one that was truly probably having sex outside of marriage, probably was doing a lot of those things, and people don't remember her. Do you know what I mean?
Is she the last wife?
No.
She's not is she the next wife? No.
No, it's Jane, and then Anne of Cleves, Catherine Howard, and then Catherine Parr.
They're all the same freaking name. The only one who has a different name is Jane. It's Catherine, Anne, Jane, and Catherine.
Yeah.
So
that was
that's Anne Boleyn,
the first beheaded wife.
Yeah, she was beheaded. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna go keep laughing at jokes about J.D. Vance killing the Pope, because that's one of the best things I've ever seen in my life. Are those jokes?
All right. Well, anyway, have a great time. Like and share with your friends or whatever.
Next week we're gonna do Jane Seymour. Probably won't be a very long one. She dies pretty early on.
Yeah, she doesn't have a lot. Maybe we do 2.
We could probably do Anne and Jane.
How many weeks do we have until?
I think we have enough
The
weeks,
show.
but we could always like make one of the weeks. Elizabeth, we'll talk about it. Well, maybe I'll see how much I can find.
We'll see what we can find. But
But anyway,
all right, you guys have a
So
great
that's all for
time.
now.
Goodbye.